Welcome back, gaming fiends. Jamie, your Mythic Dungeon Master, here with you once again to share some more of my infinite wisdom on the art and nature of role playing. Of course, I say that in jest because I'm not an OSR egomaniac DM. I released my video discussing my problems with OSR DMs. Initially, it was supposed to be a double subject video where I discussed the problem with OSR players being dumbasses as well. But I took too long talking about just the dungeon masters, and I wasn't able to get to the section on players. So I'm going to try to remedy that today. But I think the question's already been answered by some of the comments that I received yesterday. One from one individual who said, uh, he asks the question, are OSR players dumbasses? And then promotes Palladium role playing. LOL. Well, let me explain it for you because I understand that comprehension is not your strong suit being a part of OSR. You don't understand anything that's been written in the more recent 10 or even 20 years, but something 30 years ago, you have a little bit better chance of understanding it. But I've always promoted the Palladium settings because they're very rich and detailed. I still do that, whether it's Palladium Fantasy or specifically Rifts, which I really, really like. But my advice to you, come back in 10, 20 years, and then you'll understand my videos. But that pretty much answers the question. So today's question is going to be, which group is worse? 5e players or OSR players? They actually share a lot of common traits. So I'm going to try to discuss some of those today. Now, the whole point of these videos, maybe it's to piss people off, but actually it's to let you know about the things that bother me as I've been out there in the wild world, whether it's at the local friendly game shop or in some sort of online game in a virtual tabletop, and the problems that I've encountered with other people that just kind of ruin it for everybody else. And most of the time, they're either 5e players or OSR players. And there's a crossover between the 5e players and the dreaded Pathfinder Society players. That's another third group, which they're just horrible, period. So we won't even talk about them. If you want to talk to me about anything, if you, it's because I promote Pathfinder as my favorite game. But again, as I've said to everybody, if OSR is your thing, hey, more power to you. If 5e is your thing, go for it. If you're like me and you enjoy Pathfinder First Edition, then of course you're right and you have some sense and you enjoy more complicated games and you can comprehend them. So let's start by taking a little look at a definition of some OSR stuff before we dive into this. I'm going to try not to go so long. Yesterday, by the end of my video, I had to pee so bad, I had to actually cut it short. So I even screwed up the ending where I said I liked checkers more than chess, but believe me, I like chess more. All right, so let's pop over here to the Grognardia blog, Musings and Memories from a Lifetime of Role Playing. If you're not familiar with Grognardia, it's a blog maintained by James Malucheski. I'm not sure how you say the guy's name. It's basically the patron saint of OSRs and failed Kickstarters. So here he's got a quote from this Osric book. First, play Osric fast. Part of the beauty of this system is with a little knowledge and practice, you can run a battle between 10 player characters with a dozen hirelings and henchmen and a handful of summoned monsters on one side and 30 ogres with a shaman and 24 wargs on the other, and you can resolve it in 30 minutes flat. Now, that right there should be enough to tell you. That's what I call a game bang. I mean, it's the equivalent of getting all your buddies together to watch a trauma movie. You know, you're going to watch The Toxic Avenger and drink beer and throw popcorn at the screen. Sure, it might be fun, but it's not the kind of movie that's going to enrich your life. These kind of game bangs where you've got 100 people around one table, quote unquote, playing the game, they're not going to be immersive. They're not going to give you advanced story worlds that you can lose yourself in. It helps to roll the dice in handfuls, But the big things that make it possible are the simplicity of the combat rules and morale. Well, I mean, just reading combat rules helps. I mean, I know a lot of you guys have problems with reading rules that, are a little more recent, but it's something you can all work on. And then morale. This is one of my big problems with the OSR is they like to pretend that a lot of these concepts only apply to the games that they liked from 30 years ago. You remember, I played those games as well. That's how I got here. That's how I made an informed decision of preferring Pathfinder and the tactics and immersion and adaptability and modularity involved in it. Morale is something you can apply to any version of any game. It's all up to your DM. Only poor DMs need to have everything baked into the rule set or have the actual book remind you, oh, by the way, you can roll morale. So he continues, don't forget morale. It's important. It's for skipping over the boring bits. The moment it becomes obvious to intelligent monsters that they'll lose a fight, they will run or surrender. I mean, that is good advice. But again, it's not the sole province of the OSR. And this brings me to the second thing, which is please do skip over the boring bits. Fudge things to make them faster. If they can't be fudged, then the GM and the players should share jobs fairly. If the party's using detailed encumbrance rules, then the GM shouldn't have to do all the bean counting. Again, very true. The players should present completed character sheets with all of their information filled out, hopefully well before they come to the table, be it at your store or on a virtual tabletop. After all, GM is busy doing GM-like things such as drinking the beer that's so vital to his or her concentration or laughing cruelly at the player's latest mistake, and so has no time to do the math. Because again, OSR and 5e, math is hard, right? Guys, math is hard. The thing is, in OSRIC, generating a player character is fast. If you die, it's a quick and easy job to roll a new character and get straight back into the action. So your character didn't matter to begin with, not making any kind of story. Doesn't matter. They're all interchangeable, right? Which means that dying isn't so much of a pain in the neck as it might be with other systems. I don't know. I mean, do I even need to continue reading any of this nonsense? If you do want to learn more about OSRIC or OSR or whatever, check out the Grognardia blog. A lot of Malachevsky's musings are interesting to read if you're into nostalgia, because that's pretty much what it is, nostalgia for the past games from 30, 40 years ago. So if you like that, that's cool. Go and visit it. Which brings us back up to today and me trying to deal with you. So let's talk about some of the problems between that with both 5e players and these OSR people. They think playing in a group of 10 people is a good idea. Again, not everybody understands Stanley Kubrick films, and trauma films are more their speed. That's cool if that's you. Try not to shame you over it. But here on my video blog, I'm going to talk about the stuff that bothers me, okay? Both all OSR players and 5e players, pretty much all they do is whine, 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 whine. Pretty much. I mean, if something doesn't go their way, they're mad at the dice, they're mad at the GM, they're mad at the Dungeon Master, they're mad at the game itself. Anytime you sit down to a table, be it live or virtual, you're signing a social contract that you agreed to play this game. So don't complain about it, period. If you're going to complain about it, go find another table. That's one of the things I'll do instantly is just ban people for complaining. I don't want to hear it. If I'm running a game, then I put a lot more effort into getting you to the table than you put in getting me to it, okay? 5e and OSR players think the game is only about them. That's it. When I ran a rather lengthy ongoing Pathfinder campaign at Hit Point Hobbies. Give those guys a shout out. Of course, if you're in Aberdeen, North Carolina, stop by. It's a great place, great atmosphere, and plenty of tables to have games. There was a competing 5e table in the same room, and they were a bunch of loud assholes, honestly. They would constantly yell at us like, "You guys be quiet!" if we were being too loud, which was very rarely, because if we did get loud, I would say, guys, kind of hold it down a little bit so we're not overpowering those guys. If they were too loud, I would get up and go over and ask them and say, do you mind holding it down? They would just yell at me, and when I tried to talk to the DMs afterwards, they were kind of standoffish jerkholes. So there you go, bunch of jerks. Online 5e players and OSR players, they're the same way. They think the game is just all about them. They'll just continually talk, never allow breaks for another player to say or do anything. Um, if you're playing on a virtual tabletop that allows whispers, which are secret communications between players or the GM and players, I had one that was just constantly whispering to the GM. It was like he wasn't saying anything to anybody else in the group. This guy was supposed to be some sort of cleric paladin mesh, right? Which generally those characters want to be helpful and beneficial to the group, provide some kind of moral compass and direction, right? But all he did was whisper to the GM because he had some kind of secret mission between him and his gods and whatever. And even then, he was loath to offer healing or support or anything like that to anybody else in the group because the game was all about him. Another thing about 5e and OSR players is they will constantly complain about the game being too fiddly. I know I already mentioned that they whine, 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 whine. And that's going to kind of come up, be a recurring theme, but we're going to talk about some of the specifics. It's too fiddly. It's too fiddly. Doesn't matter what it is, it's too fiddly for them. Doesn't matter. They want a game basically with just no rules, just no rules. Just otherwise, if they have to make some kind of decision, it's just too fiddly. Meaning, do I apply power attack, or do I rage this round, or can I apply this ability? That to them is too fiddly. Again, somebody like me who likes the complexity, I don't mind trying to determine, okay, do I apply this or that in this round? Big problem with both OSR and 5e, they want everything nerfed. 5e, I do think there is kind of a beautiful simplicity to bounded accuracy, but for whatever reason, OSR players are like, oh, math is hard. Oh, Pathfinder, more like Mathfinder. Is all I can think is that in their mind they're like 1 + 1 = what? Yeah, yeah. It's not like we're living in a society everybody has a stupid phone. It's got multiple apps on it that do a ton of the work for you, from character creation to rolling your dice to calculators to help you with that oh so hard problem of 1 + 1 equaling what? But no, math is hard. It's fiddly. It's hard. I don't have time to add 1 + 1. They have little to no strategy whatsoever. It's, hey, we see a monster, and they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to do an all-out attack, which is the same thing they always do over and over again, or they're going to try to talk to it in some way, which is what they always do. I mean, talking is fine, but everything is different. It should be, every situation is unique and can be approached in different ways. But these OSR 5e players think they should just be able to step, swing, swing this round, rinse, repeat, step, swing, swing, or lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt, lightning bolt. Just the same thing over and over and over. Little to no strategy. They're annoyed by terrains. They're annoyed by, creatures with resistances, be it spell resistance, damage resistance, immunities, all these kind of things. They feel personally insulted that their lightning bolt didn't wipe everything out in one move because the game's all about them, nobody else, right? They feel attacked because their sword stroke, which normally kills most things in one blow, had no effect on this demon because it has damage resistance. It's like, right, yeah, you have to think. So if you're attacking something, you're dealing with something that your normal mode of attack cannot affect, what do you do? That is the challenge. How do you involve your environment in it? In the same week, I had this problem with a batch of 5e players. Okay, and I have the great misfortune. I don't play 5e on the regular. I have played it. Okay, but the problem is that you will find 5e players that are trying Pathfinder. Okay, and that's when I have to deal with them. The exact same week, two different groups I had to deal with this. One was in a Pathfinder 1 game, one was in a Pathfinder 2 game, which I can't stand Pathfinder 2, and thankfully I'm not playing it anymore. Um, Big monster at the end of the hall. 5e guys run up to it. They hit it. Well, they're mad because it's a big monster. What does that mean if you run straight up to a big monster? It means it provokes an attack of opportunity and they whack you in the head. Well, if it's a monster that whacks you and knocks you down, then you've got an extra problem because when you try to stand up, it provokes again, they hit you again, and they knock you down. I like this level of realism. But that's also because I dig old martial arts, kung fu movies, all that kind of stuff. I spent a lot of time studying that kind of stuff. And I like that level of, it's not necessarily realism, but that level of the simulation. Okay, it's all abstract, it's all a simulation. And we all fall somewhere on this spectrum of enjoyment of what we like. Okay, you don't like what I like, that's cool, but we shouldn't be in the same game together. So these guys, 5e players, they get knocked down. They're just, so what does that do? That starts up. All they do is whine, 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 whine. Complain about the game. Complain about getting knocked down. Meanwhile, the concept of strategy is not, strategy doesn't have to be complex, guys. I'll give you some help. Okay, I know you're not going to read. Well, actually, I mean, they are old books. They're older than 30, 40 years, so maybe you will read them. Read The Art of War, by Sun Tzu. Read, The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, something to that effect. If you're not going to do that, go watch the movie 300. What did the small group of Spartans do to battle the incoming Persians? They drew them into the narrow valley to where their great numbers were not able to be used in great effect. Go watch the movie then. There's actually Samurai 2. What is it? The battle at Miyagu Island. Can't remember the exact title, but anyway, it details one of Musashi's classic battles against an entire rival samurai clan. One guy against the clan. Now, if he was a 5e player, he would have ran right into the middle of them. They would have chopped him down, and then he would have died whining about it. Well, there's too many of them. I can't win. Yeah, so they don't like strategy. They don't like tactics. Again, they're scared of math. 1 plus 1 equals what? What? I do like the elegance of the 5e advantage system. If you want to adapt that into Pathfinder, which is what I do, if I give somebody an advantage or disadvantage, it's either a +4 or a -4. That's kind of what it equates out to. 5e players want everything banned. I think this is just the 5e problem, not so much the OSR, because the OSR guys have to deal with this. Like the recent hullabaloo over Oriental Adventures or Ravenloft or what have you, where they're just offended by the existence of these books. They must be wiped out. So what do you have? You have Wizards of the Coast going and adding all these disclaimers to all their quote unquote legacy books. These are racially insensitive, blah, 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 blah. So it's just like, whatever. Did it make the world a better place now? I don't think it did. Yeah, they constantly complain about the encounters, complain about the adventures, complain about the systems. If anything doesn't go their way, they just complain about it, complain about it, complain about it. 5e and OSR players don't like to read rules. OSR specifically, if it's not a version of that game that they love from so long ago, they're just not going to read it. They just can't comprehend it. Like, oh my God, attacks of opportunity. It's just, my mind is blown. It's just too much, just too much. Like, if you want to attack me over anything, it's the fact that Pathfinder is now a retro clone. I mean, it's essentially a retro clone. And I could be kind of an adjacent member of the OSR, but I'm not because I can't stand the people involved, and I can't stand most of the things they espouse. Now, if you can make it to the end of this video, whether you're a 5e guy that just needs to take your Ritalin, I'm not judging, so you can sit down, calm down, make it to the end. Or if you're an OSR guy who's like figured out how to press play on the YouTubes, sit to the end. I'll give you a few positives, but till now, I'm just gonna keep popping you upside the head with this 3-piece. Um, they won't read the rules. There's kind of a dueling. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but with OSR players, they use too much meta knowledge. It's like they instantly see something. Oh well, it's an ogre. I should be able to do this, this, and this. Or oh, it's this kind of dragon. It's a gold dragon. I know they're friendly. They use meta knowledge. They won't restrict their meta knowledge. But then with 5e players, you have the riff tracks problem, which is something I talked about with OSR DMs, where they like to riff tracks themselves. 5e players want to riff tracks everything. Again, we're all at different points of the spectrum of gaming. Okay, some people find great enjoyment of riff tracking the adventure. Who am I to judge, right? But just don't do it in the game I'm playing with you, okay? And especially don't do it in a game that I'm running. When we're trying to build the scene, we don't need comedic interjections over everything seen and encountered. It's not there. The best comedy is going to come through natural developments with the characters. Like one thing that happened recently in our Rise of the Drow game was the party got ambushed at night. Yeah, they're camping through the night. You roll for random encounters. They hit random encounters a couple times, and Wolf, the kind of Nordic themed Ulfin barbarian. Well, he's a ranger, but he acts like kind of like a barbarian. Does not sleep in his armor. Now most players are always like, I sleep in my armor. I sleep. You're full of shit. You wouldn't sleep in your armor for real, but they're always saying, I sleep in my armor. So this guy is not sleeping in his armor. So when they're attacked in the middle of the night, he jumps up to fight, and he's always naked when this happens. And out of that, we built comedy. Okay, we didn't have to go. We didn't have to interject some kind of I can't even think of a modern reference, but just say some kind of ancient pop culture reference like Monty Python. I mean, you didn't throw in some kind of Monty Python and the Holy Grail riff to try to make it funny. All of a sudden, it was humorous from the fact that he was running around naked and trying to fight. Um, yeah. So there you go. The game's not all about you. It's about the group. If you're online, give other people a chance to play. Give them opportunities to make some decisions, okay? At least listen to people. Weigh out the decisions. Try to go along with the group. Try to be a part of it. If you're playing live 360 in the round, again, it's not all about you. There's probably another group nearby. If they are nearby, don't try to drown them out. Don't be a bunch of jerk offs about it. I think there's actually a few more problems that I have with the 5e guys than OSR from there. Like 5e, they have no kind of sense of history. They don't care where the game came from, where it's going. They just want to know whether or not it offends them at the moment, such as Oriental Adventures or Ravenloft, or whether or not it's all about them. It's all about me, 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 me. 5e players don't seem to be interested in long-term campaigns, but that's also might be an OSR problem. And again, I said I prefer long-term campaigns where you're building a character, you're building a story in conjunction with the dungeon master or the game master and the players, and it's this kind of this bouncing back and forth that creates something new. What was the Bruce Lee quote? Let me see if I can find it right quick. I actually just retweeted it on my Twitter's machine, which you can find me at JTMCROBERTS on the Twitter's machine. It was, in the contrast of comparison, some new things might grow. There you go. That's what I want from a game. Okay. And I don't get that from short one shots and new systems every single week, over and over and over. I want a character that's got a detailed backstory. I want them to have rich motivations. I want them to be challenged by the world around them so they can interact and grow and evolve and develop in unexpected ways. Good example being my bard from Return of the Rune Lords. Just started out as essentially just a straight bard, though he was playing the Arrow Song Muse archetype. Okay, which means that they got proficiency in longbow, but they lost a lot of their other bardic abilities in exchange, and they had some abilities that tap into like arcane spells a little bit more, like evocation school and whatnot. Over the course of the campaign, he actually added a level of swashbuckler and eventually became an eldritch knight. Because he had found a magic weapon, and because of that, he added a level to allow him to use that weapon, and then it kind of helped his character grow and evolve. But then that also bounced off of what was happening in the story itself and what he was trying to accomplish. I don't want to go into specifics about that because Return of the Rune Lords is a fairly recent adventure from Paizo, and a lot of people might actually want to play it, so I won't spoil anything about it. That's another problem with the OSR. They think only adventures from 40 years ago were great. I mean, yeah, some of them are great in the way that they're written and whatnot. I mean, they did. They provided the foundation and formed the syntax of what we call role playing games. But that doesn't mean that there aren't great modern adventures. I mean, really, pretty much the entirety of the Paizo Adventure Path run for first edition is great. I mean, those are all really great adventures. You see a lot of idiotic proclamations from like these OSR doofuses about Dungeons and Dragons should only be about exploration. These plots are too complex. It's like idiot. I mean, you can still have exploration in the middle of all of this. You can have games that are more exploration focused, like something like Kingmaker. But maybe sometimes people like to have a good, intriguing plot. When in storytelling, one of the tenets that you'll hear is to figure out what scares your character the most and then push them into it. In order to do that, they have to have a set of values. They have to have a moral compass. They have to have some kind of relationship with the world around them. Okay, and a lot of those adventure paths accomplish that. I'm still waiting to hear about classic 5e adventures. There don't seem to be any, except for maybe the Curse of Strahd, the Ravenloft adventure, which I have played. Aside from that, I mean, word on the street is kind of mum about any of the new ones being classics. But right now, I'm going through a thing where I am converting some of those classic adventures. I'm currently running Slave Pits of the Undercity for Pathfinder for my Rift setting because Genius, like pointed out earlier, I'm running Rifts using Pathfinder because that's how I roll. Because I know that 1+1 doesn't equal what? And I can actually create a rather advanced game for people to enjoy. Okay, so 5e players, there's no commitment. They want to level every session. We played a session, let's be level 2. We played another session, now we're level 3. I mean, they just want to blow right through character advancement. There's no character development. They're not committed to any kind of long-term game. Okay, now I'm going to try to give you a few pros, okay? At least with the OSR, they can be very creative. Very creative. But much like the dungeon masters OSR dungeon masters that don't want you to be creative with your mechanics, OSR players can't be creative with their game mechanics because they don't want to read any kind of rules for whatever reason. OSR players can offer really good role play, as can a lot of 5e players. That's if they're not riff tracking everything. I always suggest to people to make sure there's a clear distinction between you and your character. You are not your character. Refer to your character in the third person, not yourself in the third person. Okay. And I say refer to your character because I want you to fall into the habit of telling a story, of understanding that this is telling a story. You are responsible for the part of your character and telling its reactions to what is happening and what you're being told by the dungeon master or game master. OSR players are possibly good at long-term commitment. That's if they're not these goofballs that have to play some kind of new OSR. Oh, there's a new version of the of original D&D. I gotta play it. Why do you need a new version of it? The shit's been out for 40 years. Go play the original. Why you gotta? Why do you have to buy every jerk off who wants to make their own version of an OSR game? Why do you have to try it out? If that system was so great, there it is. It's been there all along. Go play it. It's okay. It's okay. With 5e players, I guess their pro is they are willing to try essentially anything. Characters mean nothing to them. Adventures mean nothing to them. New ones come and go, come and go, come and go. Games come and go, come and go, come and go. As long as they're not put into a situation where they have to whine. Oh, I didn't tell you my second scenario. Yeah, so we had the 5e guys run up. They get beat up on this big, huge creature because they trap themselves at the end of the hall, which essentially traps the other melee players from characters from being able to get up to this big creature, and they're trapped beneath it. Okay, almost mirrored exactly in my Pathfinder Second Edition game where we're exploring this dungeon. The rogue character is supposed to be scouting up front, so he goes up to scout. Now, in my mind, if one is scouting, that's what you're doing. You're scouting. You're not fighting. So, rogue character encounters a bunch of undead. So, what does he do? Does he run back to the party? No. He plants his feet and steps and swings, steps and swings, steps and swings. Because he thinks, well, the rest of the party is just going to come running up. Well, we couldn't reach him in one round. He just stood there and fought instead of just coming back to the party using just an ounce of strategy. It's like, what can you do? I will say the possibly redeeming quality of the OSR in its entirety is that it does want to preserve a sense of history. It does want to preserve the history of role playing in some fashion. Although this is also another point of contention where people want to argue: was it Gary Gygax? Was it Dave Arneson? Was it Rob Coons? And they want to fight with each other over everything. But at least in some ways, they do try to preserve the history and pass it along to players coming along. But the idea that the only games that are worth playing are these oversimplified ones from 40 years ago is just nonsensical. I love Pathfinder right now, but I had to be willing to accept it as a modern game and start playing it. And I hope something new comes along that eventually pulls me away from Pathfinder. I'm like, oh wow, this is even better. It does all the things that I love from Pathfinder, but makes it easier because maths is hard. I know you didn't make it this far, so just in case you tuned out at the beginning, don't forget to take that with you. Like and subscribe, and there's one of those too. See you next time.